Get to the church plant! Get to the church plant! Go! Now!
I'm Pete Mitchell, and he's Peyton Jones, and you're listening to Hardcore Church Planting, the companion podcast for the Church Planter Podcast and Church Planter Magazine. Each week, we'll bring you interviews from planters who are in the trenches making it happen right now. These active church planters bear it all, share their successes, their failures, and what they'd wish they'd known when they were first starting out. Listen in to discover how God is working in their church plant.
You know, when I have a large project at home, sometimes it makes sense to do it by myself. At other times, I actually save money in the long term and have a much better solution if I use an expert. It's really not that much different with church planting. Church planters who focus on building their core team and actually planting the church and partner with portability experts like Portable Church Industries hit the ground running. Yes, you may have to raise more funds up front, but let me tell you something. If I could go back in a time machine and do one thing different in all the churches that I planted, I would go back and have invested that money in Portable Church and all of the super cool kit that they give you to make the volunteers and their lives much, much easier. Trust me, your volunteers will feel invested in, and they're going to give you more of what they got. And that time where people are setting up is going to be a time where it sets the atmosphere for you to thrive. If you're thinking about launching in the next 6 to 36 months, we encourage you to check them out at portablechurch.com.
Hey, church planter, welcome to Hardcore Church Planting, and I'm your host, Peyton Jones. I am riding solo, but I have a guest with me. His name is Josh Carter. He is a church planter with the North American Mission Board up in the city of Portland, and it is very cool to have you on the show.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. Joy to be here.
Well, I got a choo-choo train coming by, so it's going to whistle in our face in a minute here. But if you can ignore that, that is the signal, like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, that we're about to go into the land of very real life, not make-believe. So let's talk about some very real-life stuff here. You are a church planter in the trenches in Portland, Oregon, where church planters go to be eaten alive, right? Church planters go there to die. So I want to talk. This is truly hardcore church planting today, and I want to talk to you. And you and I met at a NAM or North American Mission Board Train the Trainer. You were actually a trainer. You're being trained to be a trainer of church planters because someone identified you and said, "Now that's a guy we want to reproduce." And so the first thing we like to do, Josh, is we like to hear, how did you come to faith? And forgive the buzzsaw in the background. Hopefully that makes you feel at home in Oregon, like lumberjacking, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but, it does. Absolutely, it does.
Yeah. So I had a house flood, so they're cutting my tile. But anyways, now that I've shared that special tidbit with you, share with us how you came to faith.
Yeah. So I think, for me, it goes back years ago. I come from a broken home, so I think a lot of my early experiences had to do with, it really didn't affect me a lot as I thought. I got later and I started looking back at life and how some of brokenness of just how, and even the ministry, but back, a part of it is when I moved my pastor and he owned.
Hey, Josh. Josh. Hey, can you hear me?
You there?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey,
breaking
for
up.
some reason,
Yeah,
for some reason your connection it's really breaking up.
Is it breaking up right now?
No, it's better now. Better now.
Now.
Let's go for it again.
Try this.
All
okay.
Right. All right, one more time. Start from the beginning, from the top.
Okay. Yeah, so I think my story goes back, back to when I was little. I'm 35 now, but back to my teenage years, where I come from a broken home, and I think a lot of coming out of that kind of environment has really affected not just my current life, even in ministry, I think, but really affected just my journey to Christ. And I was coming out of the broken home. My grandparents raised us in middle school and into high school. My grandfather was a pastor, so that had a huge part of, I'd say, my faith in watching a man who loved Jesus. It wasn't one way in the house and one way in the pulpit. He was a man of integrity and character, and just oozed Christ in his character. And so in middle school, was when I received Christ and came to faith. Then I would say it was later on through going back to high school into college and seminary and those sort of things that really challenged my faith, just because I grew up around seeing such a godly example. Even though I have a broken home, God really blessed me with a man and my grandfather who discipled me for so many years. So I think that I don't have the story of went to prison or anything like that and came out. Praise God for that. But I definitely have a story of brokenness in my home, and in a lot of ways lost in because of sin. And God put a man like my grandfather in my life to teach me the Word and lead me to Christ, and still today has major effects on my life. So, anyways,
that's rad, man. I love to hear that. And anyone who doesn't appreciate the fact that you were saved from your family and that influence, and it's kind of weird. I got to be honest. That's the older I get, and I'm a parent now, so it's all kind of changed up, anyways. But man, I did not get raised in the church, and I envied that so much from people. And think of it, Paul's number one guy he poured into knew the scriptures from his youth. And Paul was like, hey, that's a benefit, man. That is not a handicap. So, very cool, man. So let's talk a little bit about how you got involved into this crazy little thing called church planting.
That's a long story. But I think it goes back for me. I started pastoring when I was 19. And again, you look back before that, coming to Christ, and just the man who mentored me for so many years, my grandfather. I think God just early on, I've kind of sensed a call to ministry pretty early, and served in student ministry right out of high school, and had a youth pastor that really, I'd say, mentored me as well. And so God used a lot of mentors to disciple me through. Felt called very early, so I started pastoring as 19, 22. Part of starting a church when I was 22. Great. I was just young and naive and stupid, and I had learned. And I was there about 18 months, and my dad actually goes to that church now, which is a pretty cool story. He's doing well, and then became a student pastor at a larger church, and in ministry. In years, I was in a thriving ministry in East Tennessee, a church called Tri-City Baptist Church, and man, God just did a incredible work. But I think it was during those seasons of something very, very good in my life is where God began to speak to me about specifically the nation. So my wife and I thought we would end up in China as missionaries at one point. And that came because in high school ministry, we didn't do high school camps. We did levels of mission. So our goal was, as a ministry, was how can we mobilize students to be the church around the world, and basically use their gap years between high school and college to at least a year somewhere internationally, and being part of the kingdom. So we had those levels of missions. We had 4 levels in high school. And so my summers, literally my last few years of being a pastor there, were spent traveling around the world, doing mission work, visiting students, taking students around the world. And God just began to birth just in me a heart for the nations, a heart that He has for the nations. And so we always thought we'd want to, that God, we wanted to be somewhere where there's a great need. We just thought that was going to be international, and so we even thought about going IMB, International Mission Board, at one point to China, and my wife and I went several times, and but it's through that process when God was stirring in us in a very, very good season of our life, a good ministry time in our life, that God brought a guy named Mike Lauren to Tri-Cities to be the senior pastor, and he helped plant a church in Las Vegas called Hope Church with Pastor Vance Pittman there. And we just connected, man. Our hearts just mended towards mission, and specifically toward the West Coast, as he began to tell stories about the West. And so can't take you that whole, kind of journey, but God definitely used relationships to drive me towards the west, and seeing the need in the west on the West Coast, which is much different than how I grew up, say, in the South. And so that's first kind of how it started. And so we were I think my wife and I we're probably might be the only first planters, and maybe went to what was called the Launch Network at that time, which is now NAM, North American Mission Board. And we knew Mac Lake and those guys, and got to know them. And we went to launch training to assessment, not really even know if we want to plant a church. We wanted to tell somebody. We were actually wanting somebody to tell us not to do it. And we basically went to say, hey, interview us and tell us if we're like a good candidate for this or not. And so my wife will even tell you, she didn't even know like 2 weeks before we went, like, really, what are we going to? And so that was kind of our journey into that. And so the assessment went really well. And man, just saw so many, like, I guess you could say, giftings and just things that were us in regard to planting. And God used the relationships. God used his word. I could tell you moments just in the scriptures where God would just continue to speak to me. But there was this one passage, I got to share this. There's one passage that just kind of drove me kind of over the threshold into this idea that, okay, we were going to go plant. It was Acts 20:24. And in that passage, it says, to me, my life would be counted worthless unless I use it to fulfill a call on my life of telling the wonderful grace of God. And it was that passage that drove me to realize that, in Christ, my life's not worthless. But to me, my life would be not well spent if I did not step out in places of great need. And push me to it, man, in relationships and God's word, and the body of Christ, and seeking counsel with other brothers and sisters that just kept driving us. Kept driving us to that. And we ended up when that happened like April. By October that year, we ended up in Las Vegas here and with Hope Church there, and still didn't know where we were going. And now we've been in Portland. We're in Portland 3 years now. So,
well, tell us a little bit about Portland for people that don't know Portland and what Portland's like. Obviously, some people probably know that the famous picture of Darth Vader unicycling in a kilt with flames coming out of his bagpipes is a Portland phenomenon.
It is.
And there's the Keep Portland Weird movement. Of course, there's Voodoo Donuts. There's
Absolutely.
lots of things that Portland's known for, but it's known for not really being a place that's church friendly, wouldn't you say?
No, yeah. So that's how they recruit you here. Is they say, hey, this is a church planting graveyard. You should come. That sounds really fun. And it really is, though. The percentages of churches that make it here are it's very, very low. And that's just not guys that just parachute in like ourselves. That's Northwest guys. We have a church that we attended when we first moved up here that been going about 10 years, and they'll close the doors October the 8th. So you see this so frequent up here, and I think a large part of it is it's not because people are not nice. I mean, some of the nicest people here. We love our city and love our people. I think the issue is it's just a cultural kind of worldview in which they grow up. When you grew up here, I mean, it's Peyton, you probably played Oregon Trails when you were little, right? And I think it's kind of like that.
Man.
Yeah, I know you did.
It was no joke, literally the first computer game I ever played.
Absolutely. So, people are like, it's Pioneer, man. Like, so it's that, you've kind of, you've education and doing good and very progressive. And we've kind of come to another level of understanding. And it's that very individualistic mentality here that really drives the Northwest. I think if you get west of the Rocky Mountains, really, it's just a different ballgame. And I'll claim it's very European in not just politics, but in culture. And, so tolerance is God. I think the best way to explain Portland, Oregon is go read Romans 1. It says when man suppresses truth, it lists all the vile things man will do, which is, keep Portland weird for sure. It says that they'll worship the creation or the creator. So I think people are very spiritual, and it's just they're worshiping a lot of different things, including creation and tolerance and not a lover of truth at all. So I think that's just the reality. That's the dominant culture. And it's a little different than how I grew up, and the churches just don't tend to do very well here because of that. So.
Very cool. Well, tell us your church planting story. I mean, what is your, oh, gosh. I don't know if you can hear my buzzsaw, but again, Oregon trees, lumberjacks. I'm a lumberjack and I'm
Great
okay.
Sound. Thanks.
Yeah. I works all night and I sleeps all day. I won't complete that song by Monty Python because it will be used as a soundbite by Pete Mitchell, I guarantee. But anyways, so tell me the story of your church plant, man. So what happened? So you got to Portland and boom, what was next?
Yeah. So, I don't much people know about Northwest, but it rains about 300 days a year here. So, of course, when we got here, it was towards the end of the summer. So we got to see some sunlight before the winter hit. So that was a good thing. But, I think when we got here, a lot of our, training or time that in Vegas when we were there, it was so beneficial for us is just around this concept of kingdom disciple making. So we call it KDSC, Kingdom Disciple Society Church. And the idea of that is that if Jesus said seek the kingdom first and make disciples and that he builds the church, then our goal coming here was if we focus on starting a church, meaning a gathering, even a Bible study, if we start focusing on trying to get people to come to something, the statistics were so far against us in making it that way. Hey, we're actually going to maybe, in a way, we're going to try to live this theory, this biblical missiology of what's the kingdom of God, what does it mean to make disciples, and just trust God with his church. And that way, hey, if we don't make it and we walk away, at least we get to see God change some people's lives and made some disciples, and and we were a part of that. So I almost felt like we had to come here with almost more like international missionary mentality than I feel like a North American church planter. And
right.
And so that was like a theory for me. So when we got here, man, my first year and a half, and a lot of people were pushing me. I remember just saying, hey, so when are you going to launch? When are you going to launch? Which is nothing against that, man. To be honest with you, like I remember the first time my wife and I went back to the South to one of our partners and sat in their service, and we cried like babies just because like we loved the service. Like it was so good just to like sing again. So I think when I got here though, I realized like, man, like I'm going to have to learn to make disciples. And when I realized that crap, I can't just depend on people coming to church here. That really scared the crap out of me because I'm being honest. Like I was at a church of 1,500 and a church of almost 3,000 at Hope, like most of my ministry, I've never been a part of. Like, how do you go reach people who aren't like 2 steps away from Christ, but are like 10 steps away, know nothing about Christ, and by the way, are smarter than me, have very educated people. And so, how do you even do that and then get a church sustained in 3 years? So a lot of it, man, was, okay, I'm going to trust God's way of starting a church. I'm going to trust his way. And so I started meeting, man, like I was having 2, 3, 4 meetings a week, 2, 3, 4 meetings a day with people and just saying, hey, who do you know that I need to know? Some of these were Christians. Some of these weren't. I was looking for, I always say God does the greatest work in the tensions of people's lives. He does in my life. That's one of the greatest growth I've ever had is when there's tension in my life where I got to depend on God. And so a lot of it was just looking for needs, like even like conversations in our neighborhood, finding what were struggles for people and how I could step into those and meet needs. And I sent an email out to schools in about 2 to 3 mile radius from my house, principals, just to see who would reach back out. And I would sit down with principals and, I call it calling the gorilla out of the cage. I've heard Andy Stanley say it before, call the gorilla out of the cage. Like I knew they didn't trust me. So I wasn't going to allow them the opportunity to not trust me. So I would just walk into the room and say, listen, I wouldn't trust me either. I wouldn't trust me. You don't know me, but let me prove it over time. And I would always say, tell me what your top 3 dreams are. And so I started making lists of like needs, like within the schools, within anybody that would open their heart to me, a neighbor, and what were ways that I could step into some of those needs, and ultimately share not just the love of Christ, but the word of Christ. And when they would ask me questions, based on what I think about something. And so a lot of it was that I was almost like networking. I saw myself almost like community developer and meeting needs way more than I did I'm starting a church, if that makes sense. And
yeah,
and
it
then,
does. Tell me, so what did that look like? I mean, what kind of things did you end up doing? And, okay, this is all I'm going to ask you. Like,
yeah,
your church, how big was your core team when you started?
So we had 4 families that moved from Tennessee, but they didn't move out here at one time.
Okay.
So,
and then
so it was
how
pretty,
many people, because I know your story, right? Like I know you. I know that your church has grown primarily through conversion growth.
Yeah.
I'm not into numbers. Anyone who knows
sure.
about me knows this, but tell me what your church is doing right now. What's it running?
Right. So we're around 100 people.
Okay.
Right around 100 people, right now.
And people have to understand. People have to understand.
That's huge in Northwest.
Yeah. It's like when there's church planning metrics that when you change, like when you shift geography. So I would tell people, I would say, hey, our church in Wales was 125 people. What people don't realize, that's a mega church.
No, for sure.
The biggest church in Wales is the one that was planted outside of Lloyd Jones's. Now I had a hand in that. I wasn't the lead planter on that at all. It was more like the evangelist, more like an itinerant. What happened was that one is around 400.
This is huge.
And that 400 people right there is like, how do I put it? That's unthinkable, but like
it's
125 would, that'd be like a 10,000 person church. 125 would be like 2,000 people. So you have to understand the context of where you're at. It's impressive. 100 people in Portland is impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't, and I have to keep reminding myself of that. And that's why even when we had team members move out, I mean, I would tell any planter that comes here is that, cause I think a lot of people are like, well, gosh, you had like 4 families. I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. Like when you take 4 families from a context where, the worldview is church, even if you don't, I used to have these, like, even if you don't go to church, it's respected, in a lot of cultures around America. So like you might not go to church, but once you have kids, you're like, you know what, I should probably get them around church morally, right? Like it's a good thing. Well, here that's like, it's not even like a thought. Like people don't wake up and think, hey, I should go try a church. Like that's just not in the concept. So what happens is when you take 4 families from Tennessee, now it almost, although they've been awesome, they also have to, I call it detox.
Right.
Because now it's like, oh crap, they've got to make disciples too. And I think the problem is now you've got such a large learning curve to even learn how to do that when you've never done it. When church has always been about bringing people into it, it's always been about, when you live a lifestyle of that, now you've got to start having conversations and looking to disciple people outside of church. So like when we first started, even with our core team, I would say I call it don't go church on people. So we didn't invite people into stuff. Like people couldn't understand, like you have something in your house and you don't invite people to it. And I'm like, because if I don't mobilize people to make disciples outside of a gathering, we're shot.
Right.
So I was having to detox people, man. And we still are. I mean, I've been here 3 years. I still think I'm detoxing. Because I get back to that too. I look at 100 people and I'm thinking, dang, we should be like 400 people,
right?
And so I get it. I mean, it's really hard for people to really understand that. But it's so true. I mean, a large church here is 250. It's a good church. Now, bigger churches, but they've been here forever.
Right.
One of the largest churches in Portland, which we love them. I mean, that's one thing I love about Portland is because most of them fail. When I got here, all the pastors have been so awesome, man. It's such a city minded thing. But sometimes I think it's because they're so nice. It's because they know that's going to beat the crap out of us.
Yeah.
And so they just feel bad for you. They're like, yeah, that guy's another one.
Yeah.
And but I think that one of the largest churches in our city, started with about 300 college students that came out of an existing church. Like that's different than parachuting in, and having nothing. And then to think that, try to detox, learn how to really do a completely different lifestyle to reach people, and try to move something to become sustainable in 3 years is like, you're not going to find it up here. That just doesn't exist. And so, I think that caused some barriers for us. And so I spent time kind of in multiple worlds. And if you can't do this, you can't plant here, is I had to detox the ones that come from a church background, and I had to start a lifestyle of reaching and trying to disciple people that maybe never come to a church, and hoping that somehow that would translate to church. And then I had to start meeting these needs in the community and looking for opportunities to build long-term a long-term foothold.
Right.
People that don't believe the same thing I believe.
Give me an example of where that happened. Like,
I'll give you a school, for example. Okay. So I probably sent an email to maybe 10 principals. I had 2 that reached back out to me. Okay. The first one reached back out to me, who's not even the principal of the school anymore. One of his top dreams was he wanted this this garden for their school thing. And he said, yeah, it's lower on the totem pole for, on priorities for the district, but it's something that we could really use for our school. And here's why. I told me his whole dream. And it was kind of one of those moments, man, where I know this sounds maybe elementary, but for me, coming from what I come from, I didn't really know how to practice it. Was you just listen to the Spirit in a conversation. And I'm listening to the Spirit, and it's like, I should do that one. Now, I know nothing about gardening or building, but I had partners. So I said, we'll do it. So I left that day, got on the phone call, started calling partners saying, give me anybody you know that knows how to build a garden or,
right.
or do something like that. So I was starting to feed those needs. Well, what happening was, this is crazy. We start building this garden out because we sought the good of that community. Well, that principal talked to the high school across the street, just in bypassing, with a principal there named Principal John. He got word, and he had remembered my email, but he had not responded yet. But because we were meeting needs there, he saw that, remembered my email, writes me. I have a meeting with him. It's like a 30-second conversation with him. Again, I call the grill in the room. I wouldn't trust me either. What's your dreams? Blah, blah, blah. I give him a card, and I always tell the principals, I said, hey, when you're sitting in your office one day and you've got a big need and you have no clue what to do with it, I want my name on your wall. I want you to remember me. And so he called me one day and he said, hey, I had like a 30-second conversation with this guy. This is the second largest high school in Oregon. He calls me one day and says, hey, man, I'm starting this community board. I want you to be on it. And I'm like, what? Well, how'd that come? Because we saw the need at another school. Conversations happened. Now, this thing goes deeper. I go into this community board meeting one day, which I'm now on. And by the way, we've gotten a huge award from the district since then. And I'm on this board, and there's this lady on the board who long-term ended up coming to our church for a season a few times. And the reason why she came one Sunday, she said, because she watched us for so long, do so much in the community. And she's not a believer, but she just wanted to be a part of what we were talking about. And she didn't know what we were talking about. She's like, I just want to be a part of whatever you're doing because what you're doing is so community driven. The first time she ever came to church, Carrie's probably 50 years old, and her husband's another principal at another school, which is crazy enough. She comes, and the reason she comes, she's searching, because what happened was about 3 months before she met us or found about the garden, then I came on the community board, she was really struggling with attention in her life, and she didn't know what to do with it. And so she was searching, and a friend of her gave her a Bible. And so when I came on that board meeting, or on that board at that high school, which came out of serving the need at the elementary school, when I sat down there in about March, she said that she believed that God had sent me there to answer her questions for her.
Right.
And I mean, I can tell you multiple stories like this. So this lady ends up coming. She has a moment. I'm even afraid to tell some of my friends, but come out of Southern Baptist world, and so of some things that happened. But she's literally driving down her car one day, and this is after our meeting when she tells me that God sent me there to answer her questions. She's driving on the road one day and says she hears God say, "Come to me. You've always been mine." And she pulls her car over, dude. She pulls her car over, receives Christ, crazy, crazy story. And calls me. Her husband's Japanese, not a believer. Was very supportive of her being that way. Which you kind of find that up here is you don't get family units, you get individuals because that individualistic mentality. And man, I have multiple stories of stuff like that where just because we sought seeking the good of the community, looking for the discipleship conversations, seeking community development, God is just, man, I've got a bucket full of stories where God's made things happen,
Man,
so
I would love to hear those, but we're out of time. So the saw is telling me it's time, and the train will be here to take us back to Make Believe Land. But real quick, I have a question. We always ask this question at the end of every podcast, and I want to ask you this question because, particularly you're up in Portland and, you know, I know it's more of like a pacifist place, but if you and JD Payne were to get in a physical fist fight, hey, say I've tried to match you up against someone who might be your equal. If you and JD Payne got into a physical fist fight, who would win?
Totally him, man. The only fight I ever was almost in middle school, I ran from. I literally ran, and I think I told him I was going to change schools too. So
you did?
I left school early. I did, bro. I did. I'm a wimp, man. I don't do pain. So I don't exercise very much.
Well, hey, I love that. I love the fact that you're honest, and I love the fact that you ran. You know, it's funny because in my book, Reaching the Unreached, that's the lesson that I learned when the rugby player, I open the book with a rugby player literally beating my head into the pavement until I was unconscious. And I say, you know, hey man, some of your best lessons are learned the hard way. So, the lesson I learned was run and, you know, next time run. So, you know, I gotta say that's wisdom talking right there, brother. You don't gotta get your head beat in to learn the value of that lesson, and you had some preemptive wisdom there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, hey, this has been Hardcore Church Planning. I could have spent a lot more time talking with you, Josh, hearing those stories, but God is alive and well, and he's doing something in Portland, Oregon. If people want to get in touch with you or even check out your church, what's the website of your church?
Yeah, church is Remedy, REMEDY City, PDX.org. RemedyCityPDX.org.
All right. And if they want to get in touch with you, Josh, and pick your brain a bit, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can go online to our website there, click contact, get a hold of me, or you can just email me at josh@remedycitypdx.org.
All right. Well, hey, guys, our guest has been Josh Carter from Remedy City in Portland, Oregon, and you've been listening to Hardcore Church Planning. Remember, Arnold, tell them what they should remember.
Remember, if you are called to church planting, go hardcore or go home.
You've been listening to Hardcore Church Planning. Hardcore Church Planning has been brought to you by the Church Planner Podcast and the Church Planner Magazine, which is available in the App Store for both Apple and Android devices. If you like this episode, leave us a positive review. If you didn't like this episode, we'll be happy to give you your money back.